What's up, guys? We got a gaming news DBC video. Been a minute since we've done one of these. So we just got some big info dropped from a recent Square Enix shareholder meeting where they have finally addressed the elephant in the room. Why are we still currently only getting Final Fantasy games released on Sony hardware in 2024? This was a business strategy that they seemingly dropped with Final Fantasy XV's release, yet went right back into with their recently released Final Fantasy XVI and even more recently released FF7 Rebirth. Creatively speaking, both of these games have taken huge steps in the right direction. I think both were massive improvements over like 15 and 13, and I know that 16 seems to have a vocal minority of haters, but at the very least it is a solid action game. Yeah, I'd change up a few of the decisions that went around the gameplay, but it's clearly a quality title. But with Rebirth, holy shit, this game is a fucking journey. Rebirth is hands down Square Enix's biggest and best game in years. Unfortunately, financially speaking, the quality of these games, it's not directly correlating to the big dollar signs that the company had been hoping to see. This wasn't super shocking for me to hear, as the PS5's install base has a long way to go to catch up with the PS4, and with Rebirth underperforming compared to Remake, people online were quick to point fingers at this or that. Maybe it's because, the less PS5 owners. Maybe because Remake came out when the world was shut down and nobody had anything going on. Maybe it's because people, didn't like the story twists that they went with. Or maybe it's suffering from being released in the middle part of a trilogy and people are still waiting for that last piece, piece of the story. But in my opinion, it's likely a combination of all of these things. But regardless, the money ain't there. I think it was last month the company shared that it would be restructuring their business strategy going forward and announced over $100 million in expected losses from canceling certain unannounced games to focus more specifically on their AAA titles. No, this doesn't likely include anything Final Fantasy, Dragon Quest, Kingdom Hearts, all the big hitters. Those aren't going anywhere. But if you were looking forward to something like a Harvestella 2, well then it ain't looking so good for you. This news sucks. I mean, we most likely won't ever find out what exactly hit the chopping block, but it is what it is. If the money is not there, the money's not there. Now, when you look back at that flopped Avengers game and Forspoken, that NFT game, did that NFT game even ever come out? These games were not only hurting the company financially, they were also affecting the sentiment around the company as a whole. What I'm getting at here is that it's not been a great couple years for Square Enix, and this year, well, probably isn't going to be a whole lot better. Sometime last year, I made a video, can Final Fantasy XVI save Square Enix? And my conclusion was that no, it couldn't have. Even if the game had double or triple the sales, it was going to take more than a couple successful titles, and with Rebirth and 16 not doing that great, well, looks like I got it right, so I'll pat myself on the back for that one. It's not that I want to see the company go under or anything like that, but when you're making moves that go against what your customer base is asking for or even wants, well, then you kind of deserve it a little bit. Anyway, that's how we led up to today's big news drop, and that is that a big part of their restructured business model going forward is that Square Enix will be releasing their AAA games fully multi-platform, including Xbox, PlayStation, PC, and even Nintendo platforms. For us fans, yeah, that feels like it should have been a no-brainer, but it's always easier to see these things in hindsight. I do think that if it were possible for Square Enix to print out a copy of Final Fantasy VII Remake that worked and ran wonderfully on the Switch, then I think that's something that they would have done already, but I genuinely don't think that that's something that they could probably even get to run. Yeah, I know that Switch got The Witcher 3 working somewhat well, but I did play that, and it was nothing that, it wasn't that great, okay? They had to cut a lot of corners, and, Square Enix, it's just, when it comes to graphics, they don't like cutting corners there. Rebirth in 16? No, that was never going to happen. Maybe with the Switch 2, we actually could see some hope for those games then. But in the early days of the Switch, no one really knew that the console was going to take off the way it did. How many RPGs did the Wii U have? There was no guarantee that Nintendo was going to become the big RPG powerhouse that it kind of did. And even looking back at the PlayStation 2 generation, Sony was where you would go if you wanted to play some good RPGs, some good JRPGs. And while, yes, this remains still true, It's also an era where the Switch has practically become the king of JRPGs. And when looking back now, like I said, it's easier to see how if Square Enix would have maybe compromised their push for these perfect graphics instead for maybe a multi-platform approach, well then, yeah, I have no doubt that Rebirth and 16 would have sold considerably better. But would the games be worse off for it? Possibly. It's really hard to say. Now, another thing I wonder, suppose we would have had PC versions of 16 and of Remake ready to go on day one. Would that have helped things out? I mean, I think almost definitely, right? As these PC ports, currently, they take forever to come out, and by the time they're released, people have already kind of lost the hype surrounding these games, and it loses a lot of the intrigue implying what's, the new Square Enix game when it's already 2 or 3 years behind. But I do think this is the logical move to make here. Like, on one hand, I'm sure that the Sony exclusivity cache must be kind of nice and probably immediate and a lot less risky than waiting to see if the game actually sells the way they wanted it to. But does that equate to the same potentially millions of sales that something like Remake would have seen on the Nintendo Switch? Speaking of which, have we ever even gotten numbers on just how much money that Sony pays out for these exclusivity deals? I always kind of wondered that, but it's not something I've looked up, and I'm not gonna look it up. So if you know, let me know in the comments. And so this, in my opinion, it's great news. And this is something that I was hoping we would hear sooner or later. Even when I'm streaming these games, and I'm a tiny-ass channel out here, but yeah, I definitely get people showing up in chat saying, man, why isn't this on PC yet? Or like Xbox or whatever. So yeah, this hopefully means we're going to be seeing Final Fantasy VII Final Fantasy VII Part 3. Maybe that will find a release on Switch, or Switch 2, that is, but it might come out at the same time as the PlayStation 5 copy does. It might come out at the same time as that PC version comes out. I mean, I'm personally all for that. I do know that that last part of the trilogy, it's already been started, so it might be a little too late for that one, but I mean, I certainly hope so. What about something like Kingdom Hearts 4? I mean, I see no reason why they wouldn't want to go all out with this stuff. It's unfortunate that Square Enix still hasn't bounced back from their financial issues, but I do think this is something that will help steer them in the right direction in the long run. And, they are probably not going to be seeing immediate results from this. It might take a couple years before we start seeing these releases. It sucks that we might not see any more of those smaller titles for a while. The lower budget titles that sometimes they're kind of cool, right? But then on the other hand, sometimes it's just like a shitty Splatoon knockoff. So it's kind of fine that we lose some of this stuff. I'm just thinking, if they push the most quality they can into these next Dragon Quest games, into these next Final Fantasy games, the next Nier, and these are all multi-platform, yeah, I can see the company sitting a lot more comfortably in like a couple years. And kind of like I said in my last video too, they really need to stop chasing trends like Marvel and Fortnite and NFTs and Splatoon. And just do what they do best. Focus on making these awesome RPGs that are high quality, make them available for as many people as possible, and it's simple success in my opinion. So yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on this whole thing in the comments, and we'll see what comes from this. Hopefully my next Square Enix update video isn't them selling the company or anything that crazy, but I can't really see that at this point. But I certainly still don't think they're sitting exactly safe yet. Anyway, hopefully I'll have another video for you guys soon, and until then,